Welcome to the News9 Mediaverse, and you are watching On Point with me. Today's big story is Apple's email notification. That stoked a big political controversy in India. It was a thread notification mail that was sent to 150 countries, but it has shed less light on the issue and left many questions unanswered. One of the TV9 editors also received the notification, and he sent to Apple for clarification. He raised pertinent questions, and let me take you through it. Now, what did Apple do today? Apple sent an alert, and what was the alert about? The alert was about a state-sponsored attack. The alert was about that someone is trying to get into the email ID and the private ecosystem of the consumer. What was the alert about? The alert was about the fact that state-sponsored actors were trying to hack into the system. But then we at the News9 have decided that there are certain issues which have been left unanswered. One, they require more clarification. Second, 150 countries, odd people, journalists, member of parliaments, and then other details of other 150 countries which I don't have. But I have certain questions here, and certain questions which are essential, not because Apple has a multinational cooperation has raised, because it is essential to the functioning of democracy. If we say that the Facebook and Russians used Facebook to challenge the perfect working condition of an American democracy, then my question is, as an Indian, when we talk about such generic mails, how does it impact our ecosystem? How does it impact our political ecosystem? Does it shape the discourse? In journalism, when we join our profession, we are asked to take care of 5 things: when, what, where, how. These are basic things. And why? And that is what we'll try to answer. Why, when, what, here, and when. So, the broad understanding and the conversation which I am going to have with my colleagues will be about that this controversy has succeeded the Pegasus controversy. I don't want to get into the Pegasus, it's an old issue, Pegasus controversy at rest. But then the word, quote unquote, state-sponsored, what do you mean by state-sponsored? One, do you think that it affects the credibility of the system? Second, because when you raise a doubt, you have to come with the proper answer. I'm going to play out the bite of Rahulgandhi, ASHWINIVAISHNAV. I'm going to play out the bite of Ravi Shankar Prasad also. And I have in my studio TV9 editor of English Cluster, Rakesh Khar, with me. Input editor of News9, Brijesh Pandey, who covers Bharatiya Janata Party and RSS. And Kanish Gaur, a very noted expert on cyber issues. But before that, let me get to the broad questions which our editor Rajni raised. So let me go back to this. You must have read a part of it. We understand the dictionary meaning of the word state-sponsored. I would like to know how Apple defines the word state-sponsored. That's the first question which Rajni sent. It has been sent. We believe in openness and open conversation. And then the second is, can you please define the standard operating procedure, which is called SOP, as you would know it, for such auto-generated emails? What sort of algorithm is applied for such response? Many people wouldn't even know that what algorithm is. Many people would know that, but an average Joe or an average person using such phone wouldn't even know that there's an algorithm which runs. And then, are these emails sent to everybody or specifically chosen individuals? And I am now tying up this. Not in the context of opposition, not in the context of BJP versus Congress party, not even in the context of Indian Parliament. I tie this debate today in context of democracy. And I see it from a different perspective. Healthy doubts are important. And Indian democracy is strong enough to absorb those doubts. But it is akin to saying, like it happens in our discourse, and I really don't want to get into it, something is wrong with the machines. So the same machines can win you one election, but the same machine makes you lose another. But that's not the debate today. I'm going to stick to this point, and I know you are getting the moot point. It's about democracy. And the most important thing in a democracy is faith. Faith. And on this, I'm going to come to the editor of TV9 English Cluster, Rakesh Khar. Democracy is directly linked to faith. And I asked you this question, sir, on this Apple email notification. Don't you think that somehow it leaves an entire part unanswered, does not shed light, and when it uses the word state-sponsored, it comes near the word faith?
Absolutely, Karthik. I think you raised the key questions that need an answer. I don't know whether Apple is the only person to answer them, but when you link it to democracy, obviously the debate gets a much bigger canvas. First and foremost, Karthik, let's delink the communication that has come in response and the charge. Let's not in any way undermine the charge. It's a very, very serious charge. And if the charge has a certain profile, unfortunately, as of now, there is a certain profile to it. So when the profile has a certain trajectory, it assumes far greater political connotations. That's where democracy becomes relevant. Faith and trust are cornerstones of democracy. So seriousness of the charge needs to be really delved into full potential detail. Now the communication which has come, which is to my mind, to say the least, it's a broken communication. First of all, it does not define what is state-sponsored, attack in this case. They have made a very thin distinction, which is there in an annexure. When we separately sent a mail to them, they said that the annexure lists a very well-oiled machinery of cyber criminals versus state. State, they are saying, is very, very nuanced, very, very modern, very, very, penetrative, while as cyber criminals, even if at their best, technologically, even otherwise, are not as equipped. So that raises the level of the charge to a far greater extent. But when you don't define what the state is and who the state is, they have said we are not pinpointing the state right now. You are raising far more questions than you are actually trying to answer. To be fair to Apple, they've raised an alarm. You raised an alarm, you can't fault them for that. But if there's a certain profile, all the three questions, how do you define what is state sponsored? Second, why don't you pinpoint which the state is? It could be within India, it could be outside. We do know that now cybercrime is part of the larger weaponry, if not of mass destruction, but of larger political interference in states across the world. So when technology plays the role of, so to say, disturbing your ecosystem, whether in India or outside, we cannot be just dismissive of it. So whether it is about individual privacy or the sanctity of the democratic frameworks that you outlined very clearly, we have to connect the dots, Karthikeya. It's an evolving story. We don't have the full information, but it's first and foremost, it is important that Apple comes out and gives all the relevant details in public domain, because they have triggered a storm, if I can use that word, which is bound to rile the opposition leaders in this case, and the expected responses from out there. But let's not jump the ship and get to hear more and more from Apple. And I do hope that they have a Apple. I'm just linking it to the larger Apple story in India. The Tim Cook has been coming to India, meeting the Prime Minister very recently. We do know that Apple business model in this country is doing so well.
I have an issue with the word state, but since you mentioned the opposition leaders, let me play out the bite of Rahul Gandhi first.
Absolutely.
And then we have ASHWINIVAISHNAV making three very important points, but let's play out the bite of Rahul Gandhi.
The last Pegasus inquiry, where, my name was also there, that sort of disappeared, right? So that tells you the situation in the country. Our job as opposition is to make people understand what is going on. And I'm very happy that more and more people are understanding what is going on. It's very clear. And this is clearly a sign of panic, right? This is clearly, I mean, this is not just one person, this is the whole opposition. So this is obviously, this is not done by somebody who's not scared, or this is not done by somebody who's honest or who believes in themselves. This is the work of criminals, of thieves. Only thieves and criminals would want to do this. कम लोग हैं जो इसके खिलाफ लड़ रहे हैं, मगर हम डरने वाले नहीं हैं, हम लड़ने वाले लोग हैं, हम पीछे नहीं हटेंगे. जितनी टैपिंग करनी है कर लो, कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता, मुझे तो कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता. अगर आपको मेरा फोन चाहिए मैं दे देता हूं, आपको उठा के ले लो.
Okay, that's angry Rahul Gandhi. That's not a new thing. I wouldn't use the word perpetually angry, but that's angry Rahul Gandhi. Government seems to have taken a very strong sort of an objection to this. I'll play out the bite later of Ashwini Kumar, a very sort of a nuanced press conference this gentleman did. They're pretty upset on this issue. Why? Because such controversies come and go, the government is in shape, it's healthy, it's, politically, it's out there, But then this has really upset them. Why?
Well, Kartikeya, elections around the corner. We saw that, there was a Pegasus scandal, when many journalists, leaders and businessmen claimed that, their phones were being tapped illegally. And that controversy has barely died down with this kind of controversy coming, and only of leaders belonging to the India opposition bloc. It created a lot of, chat on the ground. And the fact of the matter is that, when Rahul Gandhi, Mahua Moitra, Priyanka Chaturvedi, Akhilesh Yadav, all of them started, publishing the notification which they have received from Apple, it became embarrassing for the government. And then, we saw AMITMALVIYA immediately coming out and clarifying that, we should wait for the Apple clarification before we jump the gun, and we should wait for the official clarification. Only then we can go ahead and, and say that which person or which group or whether the government is behind all of this.
Because the opposition has been targeting the government on being the surveillance state.
Absolutely, because look at the profile of the leaders. There would be many more people who have received, but look at the profile. Asaduddin Owaisi, Rahul Gandhi, Rahul Gandhi, team of Rahul Gandhi. Then you have Priyanka Chaturvedi. Then you have Mahua Moitra. Then you have various other leaders, Akhilesh Yadav. So the profile was like, it looked like, as if the entire opposition is being targeted by that. And when the clarification from Apple came, I completely agree with Rakeshji, when he said that the reply raised far more questions than it answered. The government was quick to claim that, it's just a waste of time. Apple has clarified once for all that the government is not behind that. So all the opposition is doing is to raise unnecessary questions.
No, I would say opposition is right in raising all the questions that it deems fit. The only challenge here is that, Rahul Gandhi and many of those who've been, so to say, receiving this email have identified the country, while as Apple has not identified the country.
But the point is, sir, that what actually raised the temperature for the
and
government.
They're fair to do that as opposition leaders. So that's what I'm saying. They're fair, while as Apple has said that we are not identifying the country. The problem with the entire story as of now, it's a developing story, is that if Apple is saying that we are not identifying the country,
absolutely,
they're not classifying the definitions, they're not defining the algorithm which draws a certain profile. There is a certain trajectory, as I'm saying repeatedly. He pointed it out very well. And then lastly, they're themselves saying that it could be false. They're not sure.
In the same sentence, they're negating that very sentence.
Okay, Kanish Gaur is also with us. Before I play out all the chunks, all the bites of ASHWINIVAISHNAV, is this a sort of a regular thing, a sort of a auto-generated mails, Is it something regular? Can't they be more specific? Can't they be more targeted? Kanish?
They can't be more targeted than this, where they have told that there is a state-sponsored advanced persistent threat which is targeting a specific Apple device. Mind you, you and I are using Apple iPhones. We have not got that message. There are specific people who have got those messages. So it can't be more linear than this. And there would be a threat which could have been of a significant level. That's why this alert has gone. Apple keeps on facing such threats globally, and they have a big threat intelligence team which works towards bringing these threats down and also responding and mitigating. When it comes to attribution, more needs to be done to find out the threat, and there have to be laws in this country that need to be used. The Computer Emergency Response Team in India could issue a show cause to Apple to share more details about this. The parliamentary committee would set up a special investigation team to call out Apple and report who was behind this incident. But directly today attributing the government, telling government of India has done this is wrong, because there could be third parties. There are advanced persistent threats which come from third parties who do it on behalf of government. It could be any government,
You know,
not
Kanesh,
just government of
I'm
India.
so happy that you used the word government. You know, that is at the heart of my contention. That is where I differ from this auto-generated linear mail which has come from Apple. And I'll tell you why. But let me play out the first two bites of ASHWINIVAISHNAV. And I'll tell you why I have an objection with the word state.
अभी कुछ ऑनरेबल एमपीज और कुछ कई अन्य सिटीजन्स ने जो मुद्दा उठाया है कि उनके पास एप्पल से एक अलर्ट आया है, उसके बारे में मैं आपको क्लियरली कहना चाहता हूं कि सरकार इस मुद्दे पर बहुत कंसर्न्ड है और इस मुद्दे के तह तक जाएंगे। हमने इसमें इन्वेस्टिगेशन ऑर्डर कर दिया है ऑलरेडी और इन्वेस्टिगेशन करके तह तक जाएंगे। अगर आप एप्पल के मेल का क्लियर देखेंगे, बहुत क्लियर है, कहीं पर कोई उनके पास जानकारी नहीं है क्लियर, वो केवल एक हाइपोथेटिकल या फिर केवल एक एस्टिमेट के बेसिस पे लोगों को उन्होंने ये अलर्ट भेजा है। ये वेग है और आप सब जानते हैं कि एप्पल खुद क्लेम करता है उनका सिस्टम, उनका एन्क्रिप्शन सिस्टम जिस तरह का है उसके बारे में एप्पल खुद क्लेम करता है कि कोई उसको हैक नहीं कर सकता। दूसरी बात, एप्पल ने अभी कुछ ही समय पहले खुद ने अपना क्लैरिफिकेशन इश्यू कर दिया है कि ऐसा जिस तरह का कंपल्सिव क्रिटिक्स आरोप लगाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं वैसा कुछ भी नहीं है। 150 देशों में ये इस तरह की एडवाइजरी जारी की गई है। तो साथियों, जो लोग देश की प्रगति को पचा नहीं पा रहे, जो लोग देश को ऊपर बढ़ते हुए देख नहीं सकते, वो लोग डिस्ट्रैक्शन पॉलिटिक्स कर रहे हैं और केवल उनके मन में इतना है कि जिस तरह से भारत प्रधानमंत्री श्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी के नेतृत्व में विश्व में अपना नाम आगे कमा रहा है, उसको वो डिस्ट्रैक्ट करे और उससे लोगों का ध्यान भटकाए। फ्रेंड्स, these compulsive critics, they have only one habit. Whenever they don't have any major issue, the only thing they'll say is surveillance. This they have tried few years back. We conducted a proper investigation. The matter was supervised by the Honorable Judiciary also. Nothing came out of that investigation, including Ms. Priyanka Gandhi Vadra. She said that her 2 children's phones were hacked, but nothing of that sort had actually happened. So this is a falsehood that some compulsive critics are trying to spread. They want to distract the country, they want to distract the people from the progress that the country is making under Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji's leadership.
Okay, that is a bureaucrat, a former bureaucrat, that's a minister, that's someone who's in charge of the government. But there are 2 very relevant points here. Kanish, am I audible to you? Am I audible to you?
Yes, okay. Yes, you are.
Okay. So my point is, when someone says state-sponsored, quote unquote, what is a state? Is it government of India? Is it government of Delhi? Is it government of Chhattisgarh? Is it union territory of J&K? 1. Is it politically decided state? Is it a rogue actor within a state? That's second. Third, when we talk about state, how do they define a state in a federal system? Which part of the state they are? And in a country which is so close to the Lok Sabha elections, in our country we are witnessing assembly elections which are called the semi-finals of 2024. We have an auto-generated mail. What does it challenge? It challenges the faith in the electoral system. My point is broader. It's global. Whatever is happening, social media is the heart of it. Mobile phone is a new device. It is interfacing with newer technologies, which we call lateral technologies, which breaks the so-called mortar and brick economy. So the question is, it also breaches the faith. Ultimately, the big MNCs are also responsible. States have their values. They govern people. And right at the beginning of the election, when you have a mail like this, it affects the faith. Or unless and until you substantiate. Which part of the government is this? Which part of the state is this? What is that state? I think that's the most important part. If you say state sponsored, today the debate in the office was, भाई साहब सरकार ने किन किन लोगों के फोन में अपनी जगह बना ली, अब आप जवाब देते रहिए. It's like that. I was a child when VP Singh used to say this. I have got the lockers. So now today we can say that was very smart of the then the challenger. But what about the number? So, we must remember everything in history. Rakesh, you wanted to say something?
No, I was saying, see, Apple as a leading global MNC has a certain commitment to its consumers. So, in that sense, it has served what it does. Two nuanced points here, Karthikeya. We need to hear from our expert on cybersecurity. Is there a possibility of a breach? We don't know yet. There is no breach yet. It is an intimation. I don't know. I need to be educated on that. Number one. Number two, in 2021, we had a similar episode which is documented where 3 or 4 countries, including Uganda, I think, Vietnam and then Indonesia, Thailand, faced similar problem where opposition leaders were, so to say, identified as having received this mail. What is the learning that Apple has? What is the learning the global ecosystem has when it comes to facing such a severe challenge? Do believe, I completely agree with you and concur with you, and Apple would be cognizant of that and should be cognizant of that. When it says that state sponsored, the ramifications of this are far too serious. While the charge itself is so serious, the ramifications of putting it on state, without identifying it are far too serious. But we must hear from our expert in terms of, is there a possibility of a breach, or has Apple ruled out breach as of now?
Kanish, before I must clarify, maybe I got emotional. So the larger point is, I personally feel that as a responsible MNC, Apple has the right to inform its consumers. But when we talk about nation states like a liberal democracy like India, which is not like China, which is not like Russia, there are certain principles at play here. Boss, we are the only post-colonial country that has successively held elections barring 1975-77. Kuch to hoga for those principles to survive.
No, it's a thriving democracy.
It's a thriving democracy.
Yeah.
And suddenly when it comes up, I am not the so-called coffee table nationalist, but then it just riles me because, it has to do with our electoral process and it's pretty healthy. Kanishk.
Thank you for bringing me in here. One of the key points when we talk about advanced persistent threats and we talk about state is that it attributes towards nation states. Only nation states have the capability today to carry out such attacks. And when Apple is talking about state-sponsored activism, they are referring to the capability of a nation state actor to carry out such an attack. Now, for making such claims, they would have already done some level of due diligence. They would have done certain level of threat intelligence to attribute that certain IP addresses from which the attack has been originating has been going on for a while and it has been continuous. They initially try to basically stop one IP address, it gets replicated from another IP address, and then when they try and do an investigation to find out, they find out the IP addresses which the attack is happening from come from a specific part of the country or a specific country. That's why they are today labeling it as a state-sponsored attack, and they would definitely know from which state this is happening. But in today's time where technology is used so abundantly, there are ways of not allowing the actual position to be backtracked, because today most of these state actors use VPNs, which would allow them to remain untraceable. They would also use certain technologies such as Tor, which is called as the onion link, which would hop and produce different locations than the actual location. Now, when Apple has called out an advanced persistent threat, they definitely mean that there has been a nation state behind this. Now, it is for Apple to further investigate, and it is for the parliamentary committee or the investigation which the Honorable Minister Ashwini Vaishnav has pointed out to further find out who is behind this. There could also be a third party. There could be a third party. A nation state actor event does not mean that it is done mainly by a specific nation state themselves. They could hire third parties. You have hack for hire today, where activists are hired for carrying out such events. If you look at one such is NSO Group, which was selling some of these, softwares to countries for spying on their own people, and they have been doing it deliberately. So there could be a third party involvement as well. But a nation state has been called out, so that's why it's necessary to further investigate it. But nevertheless, it's also important not to jump the gun today and say government of India is involved in this, because there is no attribution today. Opposition MPs have received it, but there could be a third party, there could be a third nation involved as well. So calling out government of India, straightforward opposition calling out and saying government is doing it, I don't think so it is correct at this stage.
What is your understanding, the 2021 episode when it happened with Apple and few other countries involved, which is documented, as a cybersecurity expert, what is your learning from that? Did breach happen then, or it was only an intimation? Was it plugged? Was it not plugged? It is huge learning for a country like India, with or without a threat, because, ultimately each and every citizen who is using a phone needs that confidence that rightly Karthikeya linked to democracy, trust, faith. That confidence, is there a learning from the earlier episode where there was, some establishment of proof, evidence, so that we really draw a message and, come to a conclusion that this is how it can be prevented?
So the earlier incident that had happened was a zero click. Zero click means that you do not need to click on any particular link for getting hacked. If you have a certain software which is already installed and it has a vulnerability which is not patched, then using that vulnerability, anyone can access your phone. And that was called Pegasus. At that point of time, Apple as a company had certain level of vulnerabilities in their softwares, which they did not release a patch, or they were not updating it. Using that, certain perpetrators were able to get access to people's mobile phones and even laptops, and you not only download files but also manipulate data. So it was certain level of surveillance which was carried out at that point of time. Now, what has happened today is completely different. Today, the actor has tried again doing a hacking mechanism, but Apple has been able to block that. The reason they have been able to block that, and they have been able to flag it. If they were not able to find out,
can we safely conclude there is no breach?
I don't think so there is a breach today. If there would have been a breach, then Apple would have to notify us that there was a breach. Most of the cases when breaches happen, the companies where the breach has happened, they find some time to investigate. Typically a cycle of between 30 to 90 days it takes to investigate and come back and say, okay, there was a breach. Now, since they have immediately thwarted the attack, they have informed the people, I don't think so the breach has happened at this point of time.
Okay, now let me play out the bites of a couple of opposition leaders. I wouldn't say they have taken up the opportunity to attack the government of India, but they believe that they were the targets of the state.
जिस तरीके से रात को मुझे ये वार्निंग आई है, मैं 15-20 साल से एप्पल यूज़र रही हूँ, कभी इस तरीके की वार्निंग नहीं आई है. तो एक सीरियस वार्निंग थी जहाँ पे वो डूज एंड डोंट्स भी बता रहे थे हमें कि क्या हमें करना चाहिए टू सेफगार्ड हमारे जो भी डेटा है. तो दिखाता है किस तरह, और बहुत स्पष्ट तरीके से कहा है स्टेट स्पॉन्सर्ड है. ये जो अटैक हो रहे हैं स्टेट स्पॉन्सर्ड हैं. हमारा स्टेट कौन, सरकार कौन? तो वो क्लियरली ये बता रहा है ये केंद्र सरकार की तरफ से प्रायोजित कार्यक्रम है और इस पे आप सावधानी बरतिए। और आज सवेरे जब पता चला कि बहुत सारे ऑपोजिशन के एमपीज हैं जिनको इस तरीके की ईमेल आई है, वार्निंग आई है, तो मैं बस यही कहना चाहूंगी, पेगासस का किस्सा हो चुका, उसको खारिज करने की पूरी कोशिश की गई, पार्लियामेंट में उस पर चर्चा नहीं हुई। अदानी के भ्रष्टाचार पे कोई चर्चा नहीं हो रही है, उनके बचाव के लिए इस तरीके के कार्यक्रम हो रहे हैं। सब जानते हैं कि ऑपोजिशन में कौन वोकल वॉइसेस हैं और ऑपोजिशन के ही एमपीज को ये मैसेज आ रहे हैं, तो यानी ये लार्ज स्केल सर्वेलेंस हो रहा है जो स्टेट प्रायोजित है। तो मैं बस यही कहूंगी कि इस पे जांच होनी चाहिए और केंद्र सरकार को इस पे स्पष्टीकरण देना चाहिए। दिखाता है कि इस तरीके से जैसे जैसे चुनाव सामने आ रहा है, 2024 का चुनाव हो या ये 5 राज्य के चुनाव हो, जहां पे इनकी हार बिल्कुल तय है भारतीय जनता पार्टी की, उसी बौखलाहट से इंडिया अलायंस और मजबूत होता जा रहा है। उस बौखलाहट से, घबराहट से ये लोग इस तरीके का कार्यक्रम शुरू कर रहे हैं। आपने सुप्रीम कोर्ट में मनीष सिसोदिया जी का पूरा कार्रवाई सुनी होगी, जहां कहा ये 2 मिनट ट्रायल कोर्ट में भी नहीं रहेगा आर्ग्यूमेंट अगर रहता है, फिर बेल डिनायल हो जाती है, फिर उसी के बाद अरविंद केजरीवाल जी को बुलाया जाता है। तो ये पूरा का पूरा ईडी, सीबीआई, आईटी जो काम कर रही है वो केंद्र सरकार के बोलने पे काम हो रहा है।
बड़े दुख की बात है कि सुबह सुबह ये जानकारी मिली और इस तरह का मैसेज कंपनी के माध्यम से मोबाइल पर पहुंचा है। और ये जो मैसेज बता रहा है कि आपका स्टेट एजेंसी या स्टेट की तरफ से हैक किया जा रहा है या जासूसी की जा रही है। तो बड़े दुख की बात है, आज हमारे डेमोक्रेसी में, लोकतंत्र में आज़ादी और आपकी प्राइवेसी को भी ये किस लिए उसको ख़त्म करना चाहते हैं। आखिरकार जासूसी किस लिए? और इस सीमा तक कि जो पार्टी के बड़े नेता हैं, पार्टियों के बड़े नेता हैं, उनके मोबाइल सर्वेलेंस में ले लिए जाए, उनकी जानकारी हो जाए, ये बड़ा दुखद है। और डेमोक्रेसी में इसके लिए कोई जगह नहीं है। इसकी जांच हो, सरकार जांच करके बताए क्यों ऐसा चल रहा है।
Okay, now let me just come down. I have a business question for Rakesh Kar, but before that, Brijesh, tell me, this has this narrative, opposition being an underdog, doing its bit, doing things rightly, but you have this big brother state run by a very powerful prime minister and a very powerful home minister, and then they're doing things which are not correct, and what does it lead to? They can't win elections.
Well, I think it's a. I mean, opposition can say whatever they want to. I mean, there's nobody's denying them their democratic right. But if you look at the entire sequence of events, Karthikeya, one thing is given. That if all the opposition leaders, especially vocal leaders, start getting in a span of 12 hours, messages from Apple, which starts saying that there has been an attempt on your phone, the outburst is natural. And if you aren't a politician worth your vote if you can't try to use that thing to attack your opponent, which in this case is the government of India.
But a lot of people would say if Akhilesh Yadav, no pun intended, a lot of people say that in Lucknow, if he spends less time on his phone and more time outside, probably he'll do better.
Well, I think
I mean on a serious note,
if he's spending less time on his Apple phone and more time the way Netaji used to do that, from Manpuri to Azamgarh, then he would be doing much better.
Karthikeya, Netaji's time, there was only Nokia 1100 or something like that. So I seriously doubt that could have been hacked and all. And
people would say that also about Mr. Gandhi. People would also say about Mr. Gandhi, less time on phone and more time outside. Probably you'll do well.
Well, I think if the opposition is listening to your advice, they might follow it. But yeah, the fact is that it happened. There was a sequence, and since it happened to most of the opposition leaders, the bloc, that is the reason why they started this tirade against the government, saying that their phones are being targeted. The government is making an attempt to hack their phone and all. But I think the ASHWINIVAISHNAV very eloquently has put. Has laid down the entire narration for the rest of them that that this hack has not taken place. Actually, the response of Apple has baffled many. For people who do not understand technology the way Kanish does or the way Rakesh ji does, it's like when you use the word state sponsored attack, it was not there and all, the normal assumption is, oh, the government might be behind it.
Don't you remember our conversation we had day before yesterday that from 1960s I was telling you the Congress had become a master in breaking all the governments of the opposition party, the Sanyukt Sarkar which took place, number of state governments. What did Congress party did? It broke the entire machinery of the opposition parties. It was unfair. Now BJP has mastered the same trick.
No, but,
so,
but this is, that was unfair. This is criminal.
No, see,
that was unfair. This is criminal.
So, when this tirade of something more than the election comes in, I'm just right now keeping it at a political level, when something more than what they could have done but being done by the state is something, you need to be responsible. It's like saying, this machine is not working. Arey bhaiya, this machine is not working. You won Karnataka now, you won Himachal Pradesh, now you're going to use Telangana.
I think it's important. I think it's important to put two things in the context. See, first and foremost, Ashwini Vaishnav's point about stating the facts behind it as he sees them is right. But when we go to that, there is this continuous criticism of the government, that's politics. He's doing his job as a politician. Similarly, Rahul Gandhi, when he says this government is afraid and they are doing this. So let's cut out the political part. I think it's important to focus on the core issue. The core issue merits deep attention.
I think Rakesh ji, I'm still feeling more vulnerable. I don't even have Apple
Absolutely.
phone. I have OnePlus 5.
You don't know what has
I
happened
don't
to the
think it's
Android
going to even send me it's going to send me an advisory mail like that. I'm even more vulnerable.
That will happen only after you have been hacked for 10 months. So don't bother about that.
You may not even know about the Android phone.
Exactly.
Okay.
So, it's a serious issue. We must identify that it needs immediate attention. Which are the relevant stakeholders? There are cybersecurity experts like Kanishk on our show.
You think the business is going to be a problem for Apple?
No, coming to the business perspective, no, it is not going to be impacted. See, look, understand Apple from a geopolitical, geoeconomic perspective. Apple is not comfortable in China. That's why over the last couple of years, it is moving slowly. Parts of its business, those who say that it's moving entire business to India is getting too ambitious. It's moving parts of business to India for strategic reasons. And there's also a US political push and there's a geopolitical push. And let me put in some context, $10 billion business already done by Apple in India. Yeah. And now Tatas have got into making Apple phones in India. Tim Cook has invested deep faith. So I don't think Apple, when it has issued such advisories, would have counted for the impact it has made in the political arena, which probably is not in its control. And any company worth its salt, leave alone Apple, would not be happy becoming a player in the political theatre called the Indian democracy.
Brijesh, Apple ka to kuch nahi hoga. In this government, the minister's neck are also lying. Everyone knows what happened with the predecessor. The gentleman from Bihar lost his job, and things are taken seriously. And I'm putting it seriously, the reason why I just went out of that business box and came, because the politics of this has repercussions.
So I think, Brijesh, you were telling us that, how the government is planning, because that's important. One is academic debate.
Ashwini Vaishnav said that, you're going by the way government sees it and by the investigation which the government has done since morning, they don't see anything in the statement which has been issued by Apple corroborates the version of the government. But they said that since it's a very serious issue, the government will launch an investigation into the entire, the notifications which have been sent by Apple. And it'll be interesting to see, what is the outcome of that investigation.
And they've asked Apple to also participate.
They will definitely ask the Apple to participate. But right on, the information which we know for sure is that the government will launch an investigation into this entire notification business and see whether any breach has actually taken place or not.
Kanish, we are talking about a big tech company. Apple it's a big company. Google is a big company. Facebook, these are big companies. They make their rules, We use their streams, but nothing comes for free. The data gets built. Don't you feel that there is some opaqueness when it comes to these big companies? It's not as if they are completely transparent. The critics all over the world wants them to tell how do they run the algorithms. American presidents in the past have spoken about it. Obama had a meeting, a lot of people said he gets swayed by the West Coast elite. That was his biggest criticism. But the fact of the matter is that these companies are also responsible. They have their rules. I appreciate that. They have their strong systems. I appreciate that. But they have to be responsible to the nation state. That's where you, me, Rakesh and Brijesh live. Kanish?
So, it's ultimately up to the laws in that country that push companies like Apple or Google to be more transparent. Let's look at the European Union. European Union got the global data privacy regulations, and it has fined so many of these big tech companies, including Meta, for any kind of privacy or security breaches they have done. Now, unless you don't bring those laws, it's very difficult to go after such companies who have $1 trillion of worth. So it's the regulation, it's the governance, how you are building the law of the land that ultimately decides how transparent these companies are. Ultimately, the objective of these companies is to build profit. And mind you, Apple is the best when it comes to privacy or security. Had this happened on an Android device, I am sure they would have not got the notification. So Apple has really strong functionalities when it comes to privacy, when it comes to security, and notifying users. Even if it was less number of users, they still did that. So there is appreciation for Apple, but ultimately the law of the land takes the due course forward.
Wonderful. That's wonderful. The point taken. But Brijesh, Minister has ordered an inquiry. Do you think it's going to be like very time now? He's going to come and say this is what has happened. I don't think the government will allow this debate or the inquiry to linger.
Well, I think, but the government also, would gain politically from it as well, because, if they conduct an inquiry and if the government they are able to prove conclusively that, they have no role in it, I think they can lampoon the opposition leaders for saying that, the reason why they go after government or the reason they criticize government, that they want to snoop and do it is just to gain some political brownie points. And that is the reason why, ever since this accusation came out, AMITMALVIYA, who's the head of the IT cell, immediately came out and said, we should wait for the version for Apple before actually start screaming from rooftop that the government is, getting into your phone or getting into your email. So I think the government would want to prove this. And as you heard the press conference of ASHWINIVAISHNAV, he, among many other points, he also made a point that at that point of time when Pegasus claim was there, Priyanka Gandhi claimed that her children phone were also hacked, and when they asked for it, nothing of that sort was found.
When Kanish was talking about the third party, Rakesh, I was thinking of Jamtara.
Well, I mean, actually, we live in a very borderless world. What has happened across the world in a digital environment, in the digital ecosystem, there are a lot of pluses, but there are a lot of negatives also. To really penetrate one system, you really don't need an enemy looking at the front end. You really need to imagine he could be lurking anywhere miles away, but in the connected world digitally, he could be right there attacking you. And in that sense, Jamtara is here, home, and then that's where the capability, it's a test case of how these forces, what we call criminal forces, can penetrate your system.
Last I heard, Bharatpur had overtaken Jamtara, and for 2 months, Snoop was on top of it.
And look at the cloning that is happening so fast.
Absolutely.
I mean, one template that is built as a success in this case, as a vice business model, is getting replicated across every official town in this country, which is very sad and unfortunate. That also shows the power of what we call digital weaponry.
Absolutely.
In this case.
Absolutely. At News9, before I play out the bite of ASHWINIVAISHNAV once again, I have to say this, point blank, in my show, we are all for transparency at News9. We don't question why the mail has come. But Apple has responsibility to explain it to the Indian people, and I am not saying consumer, because when I say people, I mean political entities. What do they mean by state sponsored? It is very, very important.
Yeah, Karthik, I'll just simplify it because I think for our viewers it's important. They're telling me that you got an enemy and he's right there inside you. But please tell me who he is so that I can stay alert.
Absolutely. And just taking that forward, when you say this enemy, when you have an election year, what are you saying? That is Indian electoral system compromised? Do we have entered into some sort of a surveillance state? Is that the doubt? Because democracy runs on faith, and this very lack of faith is what America is encountering, where they can't even get to elect their speaker. It takes them more than 15, 20, 25 days. The faith is absent because there is no consensus how to run the democracy, which is not the case in India. There is a consensus. We know how to run our own democracy. Thank you all of you, and I leave you with this bite of ASHWINIVAISHNAV.
अभी कुछ ऑनरेबल एमपीज और कुछ कई अन्य सिटीजन्स ने जो मुद्दा उठाया है कि उनके पास एप्पल से एक अलर्ट आया है, उसके बारे में मैं आपको क्लियरली कहना चाहता हूं कि सरकार इस मुद्दे पर बहुत कंसर्न्ड है और इस मुद्दे के तह तक जाएंगे। हमने इसमें इन्वेस्टिगेशन ऑर्डर कर दिया है ऑलरेडी और इन्वेस्टिगेशन करके तह तक जाएंगे। अगर आप एप्पल के मेल का क्लियर देखेंगे, बहुत क्लियर है, कहीं पर कोई उनके पास जानकारी नहीं है क्लियर, वो केवल एक हाइपोथेटिकल या फिर केवल एक एस्टिमेट के बेसिस पे लोगों को उन्होंने ये अलर्ट भेजा है। ये वेग है और आप सब जानते हैं कि एप्पल खुद क्लेम करता है उनका सिस्टम, उनका एन्क्रिप्शन सिस्टम जिस तरह का है उसके बारे में एप्पल खुद क्लेम करता है कि कोई उसको हैक नहीं कर सकता। दूसरी बात, एप्पल ने अभी कुछ ही समय पहले खुद ने अपना क्लैरिफिकेशन इश्यू कर दिया है कि ऐसा जिस तरह का कंपल्सिव क्रिटिक्स आरोप लगाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं वैसा कुछ भी नहीं है। 150 देशों में ये इस तरह की एडवाइजरी जारी की गई है। तो साथियों, जो लोग देश की प्रगति को पचा नहीं पा रहे, जो लोग देश को ऊपर बढ़ते हुए देख नहीं सकते, वो लोग डिस्ट्रैक्शन पॉलिटिक्स कर रहे हैं और केवल उनके मन में इतना है कि जिस तरह से भारत प्रधानमंत्री श्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी के नेतृत्व में विश्व में अपना नाम आगे कमा रहा है, उसको वो डिस्ट्रैक्ट करे और उससे लोगों का ध्यान भटकाए। फ्रेंड्स, these compulsive critics, they have only one habit. Whenever they don't have any major issue, the only thing they'll say is surveillance. This they have tried few years back. We conducted a proper investigation. The matter was supervised by the Honorable Judiciary also. Nothing came out of that investigation, including Ms. Priyanka Gandhi Vadra. She said that her 2 children's phones were hacked, but nothing of that sort had actually happened. So this is a falsehood that some compulsive critics are trying to spread. They want to distract the country, they want to distract the people from the progress that the country is making under Prime Minister.
Literally every major power in the world is gearing up with its own digital currency. And so is India. But India's UPI has taken digital transactions to the next level. So with UPI,